As of March this year, more than 600 political parties have been registered with the Independent Electoral Commission of South Africa, with more than 50% making for national contestation. Now, Chapter 2, Section 19 of the Bill of Rights grants citizens the right to make political choices, including the forming and participating in political parties and the right to stand for public office. There are 4 levels in which one can register a party: national, provincial, district, and metro. And anyone who wishes to register a party to contest national elections must receive at least 1,000 signatures and pay a registration fee. So is there such a thing as too many political parties? And are registration requirements lenient? We speak now to Nkululeko Tselane, who is the legal director at the Institute of Election Management Services in Africa, for his insights. Good morning, and thank you so much for your time, Nkululeko.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me.
So South Africa currently has over 400 registered political parties. Does this number surprise you? What does it tell us about our democracy?
Well, it's around 600, and it doesn't surprise me because our requirements to register a political party and also to contest the elections were made relatively low, but that's by design, particularly coming out of apartheid. We wanted a system that would be as inclusive as possible and allow as many different people to gain representation and to exercise their political rights.
Now, from a democratic perspective, is having 600 parties more or less a sign of a healthy democracy, or does it create fragmentation?
Well, we must remember, as much as we have 600 registered political parties, only around 52 contested in the national and provincial elections in 2024, and then even then, only 18 political parties were able to enter into parliament. Now, fragmentation is normal for the electoral system that we use, which is a proportional representation system. However, I think we have to remember that we do have a very diverse country with very different views, and it's a good indication that people are still participating in the political process. Ultimately, the elections determine whether or not somebody has, or a political party or now independent candidate has enough support to actually gain representation into the various legislatures. So elections really remain the ultimate arbiter of public opinion.
Now, the Electoral Act does not set a limit on how many political parties can exist. What are the pros and cons of this open system?
Well, as you correctly pointed out, fragmentation is a potential risk. The other potential risk to that is that we may, in a couple of years' time, have a ballot that is unmanageably long. And this has also been part of the discussions why the Electoral Commission has also been discussing electronic voting, which may make it easier to manage a very long ballot. But ultimately, it has to be the electorate that decides how many political parties enter into the various legislatures. So as much as the bar is relatively low to contest, survival in the political system is a lot more difficult. You'll also notice that in the previous elections, the national and provincial elections, as much as we had many political parties contesting, many of the political parties that were contesting no longer exist anymore. So as much as they can get in, staying in is a lot more difficult.
So Nkululeko, when we see new parties forming, what's really driving these? I mean, would you say that these are genuine voices seeking representation because they feel unheard by existing parties? Or are we witnessing opportunistic power grabbing by individuals who simply want parliamentary seats and the benefits that come with them?
Look, it's difficult to say. Luckily for them, the legislation doesn't speak to those intentions. Of course, you have to submit your constitution and what your political party is about. However, luckily for them, it's really difficult to say whether it's for altruistic reasons or whether it's for selfish reasons. But once again, that's for the voters to decide. If the voters don't believe that a political party is genuine, and then it won't have support, and then it will disappear, and it will die a natural death, as many political parties have over the past 30 years of democracy.
Now, we often hear about social movements versus political parties. What's the legal difference when it comes to IEC registration?
So the IEC only registers and only regulates political parties. So you can call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. But the moment you want to register as a political party and you want to register to contest elections, then you are considered a political party. So you can really call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. But if you want to contest in politics, you are a political party.
All right. So are there different rules or benefits for organizations that register as movements versus parties in light of what you've just said?
Well, they can't, quite simply. They can't register as a movement, as a political movement. They can only register as a political party. So if they want to register as a political party, they would then have to get the necessary signatures. They would have to submit their constitution to the IEC. They would have to pay the prescribed fee and all those other compliance mechanisms that the IEC presents for political parties. So quite simply, they can't register as a political movement in order to contest in the elections.
All right, you mentioned fees. Let's talk about money. How does party funding work in South Africa? Do you automatically qualify for state funding once registered?
Yes. So what the Political Party Funding Act sets out, it sets out the declarations. So political parties are also heavily funded by donations. So the Political Party Funding Act sets out how those donations have to be managed. But in addition to that, the Political Party Funding Act sets up two separate funds. It sets up the Represented Parties Fund, and it also sets up the Multi-Party Democracy Fund. Now, in order to qualify to get a portion of the disbursement that the IEC gives from the Represented Political Parties Fund, the political party has to have representation in the National Assembly and as well as the provincial legislatures. So the process, like I was saying, the process to get in requires lots of different mechanisms. But in order to support democracy, there is a proportionate funding that does come from both the Represented Political Parties Fund, as you can hear, they have to be represented, as well as the Multi-Party Democracy Fund.
And is the current funding formula fair to smaller, newer parties trying to establish themselves?
That is a global question, the question around how expensive it is to contest in elections and whether or not the current system really supports the status quo. As it stands, yes, it's based on merit. So the larger political parties, because they've been able to demonstrate that they've got large support, will therefore receive a larger portion of political funding. It's really just a natural consequence of the competitive environment of politics.
All right. And in practice, most of these parties receive less than 1% of the vote. Are we seeing quality political discourse suffer because of too many voices, or is diversity of voices beneficial?
Look, diversity of voices is beneficial, I believe. As I've already mentioned, in the national parliament, we have around 18 political parties which are represented. So there is fragmentation happening. It's not aggressive fragmentation yet. Currently, the election reform consultation panel has been going around the country really trying to understand what the electorate and voters want in terms of the electoral system. Should there be a higher threshold in terms of percentage to get into the legislatures? That's a debate that's up. Many countries have very high relatively high thresholds. In the Netherlands and in Germany, you need to get 5% of the vote in order to first qualify to get into the legislature. So that's an ongoing conversation, and electoral reform is pretty normal post the wave of democratization across the world. So the bar may be raised, but for now we deal with what we have.
And if you were advising on electoral reform, what changes would you recommend to the party registration system?
Well, I think the party registration system as it stands is fine. A part of the submissions that we did submit to the Electoral Consultation Reform Panel was around issues such as threshold, was issues such as constituency representation. So right now, the voters do not have a direct link to their representatives in Parliament, although there are attempts to fix that. So Right now, in terms of electoral reform, I do believe, and in our submissions, we really said maybe perhaps a more constituency-based system would assist in accountability and fairness in the electoral system.
All right, let's talk about the political funding proclamation that's recently been signed by President Ramaphosa. Do you feel that it makes it a bit unfair for smaller parties to really, have equal ground?
Well, the Political Party Funding Act allows the president to set regulations for the limit of, number one, of disclosure. So if anyone donates to a political party above a certain amount, they have to disclose it, and so does the political party. So it creates a double obligation both on the donor and on the political party. And then secondly, it sets a limit to how much how much donations a political party can receive in a year. Now they've increased both the declaration limit from to, I believe it's 200,000, and then they've doubled the limit from 15 million to 30 million. It does benefit the larger political parties because the larger political parties would have more fundraising mechanisms and machinery at their disposal in order to raise. But as we did see in the previous elections, there are a number of new players and new political parties which raised substantial amounts of money. So it once again goes to the money in politics, and it does remain competitive. So we will never be able to really escape the fact that there is money in politics, and it is expensive to contest in politics. But currently, that is the game.